17 smartphones, all waterlogged, all recovered from the same isolated lake, and every single one belonged to someone who vanished without a trace. What started as a routine diving exercise in the summer of 2019 would uncover one of the most disturbing mysteries in modern criminal history, a mystery that would reveal deleted messages, desperate final communications, and a pattern so chilling that investigators still lose sleep over it today. This is the story of Blackwater Lake and the ghosts that still haunt its depths. Blackwater Lake sits in the remote corners of northern Oregon, 3 hours from any major city. It's the kind of place where cell service is non-existent, and the nearest town consists of a gas station and a diner that closes at 6. For decades, it was a spot known only to local fishermen and the occasional hiker willing to trek 8 miles into the wilderness. On July 12, 2019, the Clackamas County Sheriff's Department was conducting a training exercise for their newly formed dive recovery team. They weren't looking for anything in particular, just practicing in the frigid, dark waters that plunged to depths of over 200 feet in places. Deputy Mark Holloway was 20 feet below the surface when his flashlight caught something rectangular lodged between 2 rocks. He assumed it was trash, but when he pulled it free, he recognized it immediately as a smartphone, intact inside a waterproof case. Standard procedure required him to bag it as potential evidence. Within 3 hours of systematic searching, the team had recovered 4 more phones, all in waterproof cases, all within a 100-foot radius. By the end of that week, they had pulled 17 devices from the lake bottom. The forensic team at the Oregon State Crime Lab faced an unprecedented challenge. Water damage had destroyed most of the phones beyond recognition, but the waterproof cases had protected them enough that data recovery might be possible. It took 6 months of painstaking work, but eventually, they were able to extract information from 11 of the 17 devices. What they found was staggering. Each phone belonged to a different missing person. Cases spanning 7 years, from 2012 to 2019. The victims had seemingly nothing in common. Different ages, different genders, different backgrounds. A 23-year-old graduate student from Seattle, a 47-year-old contractor from Boise, a 31-year-old nurse from Portland, a 19-year-old college dropout from Spokane. None of them had any known connection to Blackwater Lake. Most had gone missing hundreds of miles away from this remote location. Their cases were scattered across 4 states, handled by different departments, never linked because there was no obvious pattern. No bodies had ever been found. Until now, there was no crime scene. But the phones told a different story. Someone had brought them here. Someone had thrown them into the depths, probably believing they'd never be found. The recovered text messages painted a timeline of terror that still haunts the investigators who read them. From the phone of Sarah Chen, missing since March 2016, a message to her sister sent at 11:47 p.m. "Someone's following me. Same car from the grocery store. I'm scared." That was her last communication. Her car was found abandoned on a rural highway 3 days later. No sign of struggle, no Sarah. From Marcus Webb's device, disappeared August 2018. Multiple unanswered texts to his girlfriend. Then at 2:13 a.m., a message he started typing but never sent. The draft simply read, "He said he knows where you," and nothing more. From Rachel Kincaid's phone, last seen June 2017, a voice memo recorded but never sent. In the 47-second audio file, you can hear her breathing heavily, walking fast. Then a man's voice in the distance, calm and friendly. "Hey, need some help?" Rachel's whispered response, "No, I'm fine." Then the sound of footsteps approaching faster. The recording cuts off. The most disturbing element wasn't the messages themselves. It was what forensic analysts discovered when they examined the metadata. In the hours before each victim disappeared, their phones had pinged off the same cell tower. A tower serving a remote stretch of Highway 26, 40 miles from Blackwater Lake. The same location. Every single time. Someone had a hunting ground. As investigators dug deeper, a terrifying profile began to emerge. The victims were all traveling alone when they vanished. Most disappeared during evening hours or late at night. Several had stopped for gas or food in small towns along Highway 26 before their phones went dark. Surveillance footage from various gas stations showed potential sightings, but the quality was too poor for identification. What chilled investigators most was the methodology. This wasn't random. The waterproof cases suggested premeditation. The killer had protected the phones deliberately before disposing of them, perhaps as trophies or simply as a precaution. The remote location of Blackwater Lake indicated intimate knowledge of the area, and the 7-year span suggested someone who had perfected their technique over time. Behavioral analysts from the FBI were brought in. Their assessment was grim. They were likely dealing with an organized serial predator who selected victims of opportunity along a corridor they controlled. The phone disposal was a ritual, a way of maintaining power over the victims even after their deaths. The lake was thoroughly searched for remains, cadaver dogs, sonar equipment, systematic grid dives. They found nothing but the phones. The depth and cold temperature of the lake would preserve bodies, but wherever the actual remains were, they weren't in Blackwater Lake. The phones were just markers, souvenirs deposited in a place the killer considered safe. The investigation became one of the largest multi-state task forces in Pacific Northwest history. Over 200 law enforcement personnel, countless interviews, thousands of hours of surveillance footage reviewed. They compiled lists of suspects, long-haul truckers who regularly traveled Highway 26, registered sex offenders in the region, anyone with property near Blackwater Lake. Dozens of persons of interest were questioned. Some looked promising at first, but every lead eventually crumbled. Alibis checked out. DNA didn't match. Evidence didn't connect. The most promising suspect was a man named Dale Richter, a former park ranger who owned land 12 miles from the lake and had no alibi for 3 of the disappearances. But forensic examination of his property, vehicles, and digital footprint yielded nothing. No physical evidence, no connection to any victim. His phone records placed him far from the cell tower during critical time frames. After 8 months of intensive investigation, he was cleared. The task force expanded their search, looking for additional victims whose cases might fit the pattern. They found 6 more missing persons who vanished along the same corridor. But without their phones, without remains, there was no way to definitively connect them to Blackwater Lake. By late 2021, the investigation had stalled. No new evidence emerged. No witnesses came forward with information that led anywhere conclusive. Today, Blackwater Lake remains as remote and silent as ever. The case is officially open, but effectively cold. The 17 phones sit in evidence storage, silent witnesses to horrors that may never be fully understood. The questions that keep investigators awake are endless. Who was this person who moved through the Pacific Northwest like a phantom for at least 7 years? Are they still out there, having simply moved to a different hunting ground? Did they stop, or were the phones just never found in their new dumping location? Why keep the phones at all? Why dispose of them so carefully in one location, but leave the bodies somewhere else entirely? Was Blackwater Lake significant to the killer, or just convenient? And perhaps most disturbing, how many more victims are there? The 17 phones represent only the ones that were found in one specific location during one training exercise. How many others are lying at the bottom of different lakes, buried in different forests, lost in places where no one will ever think to look? Families of the victims have formed a support network, united by tragedy and the absence of closure. They hold vigils every year at Blackwater Lake, leaving flowers at the shore. They hope that someday someone will come forward with information, that someday the person responsible will make a mistake. But as years pass and leads evaporate, hope becomes harder to hold on to. 17 phones, 17 lives interrupted, 17 families still waiting for answers. The investigation remains open. The FBI maintains a tip line. Forensic technology improves every year, offering new hope that the evidence might finally reveal its secrets. But for now, Blackwater Lake keeps its mysteries. The killer, whoever they are, remains unknown, unnamed, and unpunished. And somewhere out there, they might still be watching the same lonely highways where they once hunted. If you have any information about the Blackwater Lake case or the disappearances along Highway 26 between 2012 and 2019, please contact the Clackamas County Sheriff's Department or the FBI's Pacific Northwest Regional Office, because 17 voices were silenced and they deserve to be heard.